So I want to talk about how you can use ellipses to stand in or omit part of the quoted material. When you are omitting part of the quoted material, you still have to make sure that the actual sentence that you use as a prep sentence, as well as the quoted material, represents a grammatical unit. And sometimes you may have to insert um, or apply brackets as well. So you still have the task, even though you have integrated the source material and added the quotation marks and citation, you still have the added task of determining whether or not you want all of the source material on that one page or in that one area, and whether or not it begins with um, a capital letter or if you want it to begin with a capital letter. So I'm just going to read this and then add some analysis. There is a general rule for using ellipses, which are required when you want ellipses to stand in for any part of the quote you omit. You can use ellipses in different places of quoted material, but you also must be sure not to change the meaning of the quote. Use of ellipses does not alleviate your responsibility to ensure the quote along with your sentence is grammatically correct. So here's a screenshot of the main source, Self-Control and Grit, Related but Separable Determinants of Success, where the authors, Duckworth and Gross, are defining a hierarchical goal framework in terms of lower order goals serving higher order goals, and so on. So let's look at an example of the quote and then look at also an example of how to apply ellipses. So here's the full quote. And remember, when you are taking parts of a quote from a source, immediately add the quotation marks to remind yourself that this is the full quote, right? And then also add the citations to also remind yourself where you got the information. So here's the full quote, the original quote. We assume that goals are typically organized hierarchically, with lower order goals serving higher order goals. Lower order goals are more numerous, context specific, short term, and substitutable, whereas higher order goals are typically fewer in number, more abstract, more enduring, and more important to the individual. At any level in the goal hierarchy, goals are more likely to be activated if they are appraised as feasible and desirable. And here is a reference source that the authors are using within their original work and is actually formatted in APA. And then individuals can have not only multiple goals, but also multiple goal hierarchies. This multiplicity of motives can lead to conflicts. And then there's a citation at the end with the punctuation coming after the parentheses. So this is the full quote, right? And depending upon how we integrate this quote will determine if we add brackets, right? So, for instance, if we say Duckworth and Gross states, comma, then we would need to capitalize the W by adding brackets. However, if we say or write Duckworth and Gross states that, we wouldn't need to because then the sentence would be grammatically correct, right? So depending upon how you integrate will determine whether or not you are capitalizing or not capitalizing. And then of course, if you begin the sentence line with Duckworth and Gross, you wouldn't need Duckworth and Gross here. But if you do not, as we see here, then you will need Duckworth and Gross 320. You don't need a comma, you don't need P period, just Duckworth and Gross 320. So consider the goal you have for integrating the quoted material. What do you want to keep? What do you want to delete? Here is the quote with ellipses applied and brackets to ensure the quote is grammatically correct. So here's the application of ellipses first. This is our initial goal, right? But we still have the task of ensuring that the sentence that the quoted material that we integrate in our paper is still grammatically correct, especially if we are using our sentence as a prep statement. So we want to start our quote from here, from we assume that. And so in the original source, the original quote, the quote is in lowercase, right? If you see it here, okay? And we want to start it as the beginning of a sentence. So therefore, we would add the brackets to create a grammatical sentence with an uppercase letter. But again, our main goal is adding ellipses to stand in for omitted information. So what is that omitted information? So let's look at a side-by-side comparison. So we have this definition of what hierarchical goal framework means in terms of lower order goals serving higher order goals. And then we have this information here: at any level in the goal hierarchy, goals are more likely to be activated if they are appraised as feasible and desirable. And we have a reference source here from the authors. And so this is essentially the information that we want to take out. We don't feel like we need it. So we are adding brackets because we want to begin the quote with a capital letter. And then we are adding the ellipses because we want to use ellipses to stand in for this omitted information here. And so let's read the full quote. We assume that goals are typically organized hierarchically, with lower order goals serving higher order goals. Lower order goals are more numerous, context specific, short term, and substitutable, whereas higher order goals are typically fewer in number, more abstract, more enduring, and more important to the individual. And so we end that with a period. Okay. And then we add the ellipses. So that is period, space, period, space, period, space. And then we begin. Individuals can have not only multiple goals, but also multiple goal hierarchies. This multiplicity of motives can lead to conflicts. And then the citation. So it doesn't change the meaning of the quote when we omit this information here. Even if this information is valuable and would not distort the meaning of trying to understand what hierarchical goal framework means and how it is applied, we feel that we don't need the information. So therefore, we just added ellipses. Okay. So let's go back. Whenever we are adding ellipses, we wanted to stand in for any information that we are omitting in the quote. We need to make sure that it does not change the meaning of the quote. And we still need to make sure that our sentence, as long as the quote is grammatically correct. Okay. Because we all know that all sentences begin with a capital letter. And so there's your screenshot, and then how the original quote looks, and then application of brackets as well as ellipses. The main goal is to add ellipses to stand in for omitted information. And then also what it looks like in terms of side-by-side comparison and what we actually took out. And we're using ellipses to stand in for the information that we took out.